Good evening and welcome everyone here in our church at Ananda, Rhode Island. And for those of you who are joining us online this evening to celebrate the Mahasamadhi of Lahiri Mahasaya, who is the great devotee of Babaji Krishna. And because of Lahiri Mahasaya, those of us who have families and jobs and responsibilities in the world are able to practice these ancient wisdom teachings. There's two auspicious events happening tonight, and I believe it's by cosmic design. The first event is that Jupiter is the closest to the Earth that it has been and will be for decades. And if you follow Vedic astrology, Jupiter is the planet of the guru. The other auspicious event is that we have Asha Nayaswami with us tonight, who also represents the guru. So Asha had spent decades with Swami Kriyananda under his guidance and tutelage, refining her own attunement to Yogananda's ray. And all of us who spent the weekend with Asha can attest to the fact that there really isn't a purer or more clear channel of these teachings than Asha. And I'm going to use Kelly's line, Asha brings the real into self-realization. Kelly gets to copyright that one. And the astrological signature of Jupiter being so close to the Earth tonight is that it's a great spiritual boon, and it allows us to intuitively perceive spiritual truths in a deeper way. And there's no one better to deliver those truths than Asha. So welcome.
Think we can still make it go with this one?
There you go.
Testing.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 100. Banish the veils of light and sound. People think I know the poem because I sound check with the first two lines. Did we make it? There's a curse. We are. There's a curse that follows me around, and it infects my microphones. So it is not the fault of anybody. Pardon me. Okay. I had to lead I was invited to be part of the Kriya meditations in India. And they do it, so it's early in the morning in the US. So I did that, and I was just so moved. And I led this really wonderful, I thought, healing prayer at the end. And I kept hearing somebody kept talking while I was doing it. I couldn't figure out why, because what they were saying was Zoom. You're muted. You're muted. Yeah. They finally gave up, and I just. So, thank you very much for interrupting. All right. As I was saying, Jupiter being close is really a marvelous thing for us. We don't always know that we're being affected, but we are being affected, and how auspicious once in many decades. This is a time when Lots of good omens and bad omens are all just acting themselves out together. It's really a marvelous thing. So we are celebrating Lahiri Mahasaya's Mahasamadhi. His birthday is in 4 days. It's so obvious he was liberated before he was born. But it took me many years to be able to remember which came first, but that's how it comes first. And it's very auspicious for us to be together because Lahiri can say, just as Jesus said, wherever there's 2 or more gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. So let's start with a prayer. We'll have some music, and I'll share a little more. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahasaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless us with the living presence of your consciousness in our hearts. Help us to draw especially on the vibration of Lahiri Mahasaya, that his perfect example of divine surrender will inspire and guide us and draw us quickly to God. Oh, peace. Amen. Okay, songs and chanting, please.
Called you, my Lord, long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathed darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Long I've called you, my Lord. You guys do the melody. Long I've called you, my Lord. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offer Okay,
And next.
cherish these.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. I think you can do the actual key.
Okay.
Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrows good, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherished things, not just as words? Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrows good, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherished things, not as words? One more time, sing along. Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrows good, selfless friendship, blameless birth, cherished things, not else has word? Okay. That's it, then we're going to chant.
We'll start with Thou art my life, Thou art my life, Thou art my love, Thou art the sweetness which I do seek. A beautiful reminder that the Gurus bring to us to seek God alone.
Thou art my life, thou art
Blessed Spirit, I am He.
No death, no death shall harm
Silent prayer, asking that the spirit of all the masters, especially Lahiri Mahasaya, reveal themselves to us in our hearts. Feeling that living reality of divine consciousness, ready to enter into our heart, mind, and spirit and lift us to the realm of the divine. Om, peace. Amen. Master Paramhansa Yogananda said something very intriguing about Lahiri Mahasaya. He said, apparently, I didn't hear him, but Swami told us this, that he said, Lahiri, The word I actually have in my mind is lucky, but perhaps fortunate is what Master said, because it would be odd for a master to refer to another master as being lucky. So he said something like, Lahiri Mahasaya was fortunate because during his entire incarnation, there was no war. And during Master's lifetime, there was the First World War, the Second World War, and the Korean War. And it just, one doesn't really think about things like that unless something brings it to mind. Hearing Master talk about some of his previous incarnations, Arjuna, the Battle of Kurukshetra, in which he had to fight and kill his own cousins, and you could tell that the whole story was over because everyone was dead. One time in my life, I told the whole story of the Mahabharata in one day, from 10 in the morning till 6 at night. It was the only time I ran out of words. At 6 o'clock, I collapsed on the dais and lay there for about 15 minutes, and then I was fine. I just went on again. But I told people at the beginning, you'll know when the story is over because everybody will be dead. So of course, every story ends with everybody being dead, if you really think about it, because everybody's eventually dead. So that's how it ends. But Arjuna had to fight, and it was a horrific, horrible battle. Arjuna, Master also told us that he was William the Conqueror in a previous lifetime. William went from France and had to conquer England and had to fight and fight and fight. And then Master said that he was a Spanish king who drove the Moors out of Spain. And some of our Spanish-speaking friends researched that and came to the conclusion that he was Ferdinand III, whose body is incorrupt and is in a cathedral in Seville. Swami also had incarnations as both William's son and as Ferdinand III's son. I read a biography of Ferdinand III. His entire reign, which was 26 years, he was always at war. He had a small statue of the Virgin Mary that he put on his saddle. And he was never injured in battle. Same William was never injured in battle. But both of them fought and killed people. That's kind of what they did. I'm going to just digress for a minute away from the fact that Lahiri was different. Lahiri Mahasaya was different. When a master, every avatar has the same state of consciousness. Every God realized master. They have the same state of consciousness. They teach the same things. But we don't always, what limits them is not their understanding, their revelation. What limits them is when they take a body at a certain time and a certain personality and whatever's involved, they become bound by the culture in which they live. They have to speak to that culture and the whole civilization, the context. What is the message that causes them to incarnate at that point? And they're also bound by the karma of their disciples, because they come back again and again to help their disciples and to guide their disciples through whatever it is that their disciples need. And because, as the expression goes, all of Krishna's soldiers look like Krishna, so lots of Master's disciples are going to be kings and warriors, because that's how it would work. And so many of those disciples would need to have the courage to go to war and fight and die for a righteous cause. Over the course of the weekend, I mentioned a friend of mine who talked about the problem of the fact that his entire idea of being a disciple was to fight and die. Finding himself still alive at the age of 30 was a real problem for him because he was much more accustomed to fighting and dying like this. So there's these personalities, and it's just to think about it, Master would have gathered all these people together and put them on their horses and given them their weapons and told them to go out and kill people, just like Krishna did. It's just like earlier we were having a discussion about some very tough things that happen on the spiritual path. And I was remembering Sri Yukteswar's 8 meannesses of the heart. And one of them, very interestingly, too narrow a sense of respectability. Just sort of wanting to take the spiritual path and make it comfortable, when it isn't. It's death to all our attachments, death to all our expectations. It's not small. And spiritual figures are magnificent in their power. Now, we're not really here to talk about Master, but somehow Lahiri Mahasaya, the contrast he forms to Master, is part of what we have to think of in being able to understand, what is the message? How does this all fit together? We have, and Master always referred to it, a line of gurus. And so we have all these different figures. Christ is certainly a dramatic example of self-sacrifice. I remember Swamiji once spoke of the life of Christ as the greatest story ever told. And I, saying many inappropriate things to Swami, remarked, that's not a very original name for his life, is it? Why I say these things, I don't know, but to prove Swami's greatness, probably because of his patience. But he didn't take any of the sarcasm that I was offering. He just looked at me and he said, well, don't you think it was? Just like, yes, sir. When you put it just like that, of course I do. Okay. And Swamiji actually remarked about Paramahansa Yogananda's life, because he was talking, it was in the same context. He said at first he felt Master's life lacked drama. The teaching of Christ is really the life of Christ more than anything. And Yogananda's life was not dramatic like William the Conqueror or Ferdinand III was, or anything like that. And if you want to talk about drama, you don't look at Lahiri Mahasaya's life. And of course, he has many factors that people tune into. And the one that many gravitate to is the fact that he was married with children. And that was part of a very large part of the example that he was setting, because he was the beginning of this moving out of the idea that spirituality and what people would call ordinary life were incompatible, because they were, through the period of Kali Yuga, which we're just coming out of, in which the form of things was fixed and realities were defined by those forms. I recall going to Greece 50 years ago, 40 years ago, going to Greece, going up somewhere to one of their whatevers, to some kind of a monastery. I no longer recall any of the details. And there was a little stone room that was had been some convent. And I went into that stone room, and it just like, this feels like home to me. And it was very hard for me to come out of that little stone room. And I had a very different destiny than to live in that room, but there was such a familiarity about the simplicity of that. And even a certain, well, not even a certain, but a security in thinking about that. When I was living at Ananda Village in the beginning years, and I was part of the monastery there, and our lives were so magnificently creative and totally all over the map. We were starting the whole community, and you just never knew what was going to happen next. Swamiji was always making up something new, and it was totally fun, totally fun. And I thought to myself, because here I found myself in this monastic life, that if I had joined a Catholic monastery, which of course was out of the question for a little Jewish girl, but if I had joined a Catholic monastery, I would have been able to predict my life for the rest of my life. Every day of the year, every hour of the day, I would have known exactly where I was going to be. I was thinking in terms of a cloistered monastery. And I was torn between two realities. One was, wow, wouldn't that be terrific? Just like so terrific, because you have to think about nothing external. You can concentrate entirely. And I know for some people it would feel very confining. The other side of it was, I would be so bored, just this belief, like, what would I do? I'd be like a wild animal in a cage, if I have to sing one more darn prayer at 5 a.m, kind of feeling. It wasn't an option, but it was just interesting to think about all these realities. And so there is this thought that still permeates, if I only didn't have to do X, Y, and Z, then see how spiritual I would be. If only I didn't have to worry about money, if only I didn't have to have this longing for this thing or the desire for that thing, or have to vacuum my living room, just how happy I would be without. I mean, I actually once said to Swami Kriyananda, if life weren't so hard, it would be easier. And at the time, that seemed like some contributing remark. Swamiji was marvelous. I was weeping when I said that, I should add, because I was weeping, just because I was weeping. And Swamiji, I still remember, it's like he didn't exist. He took his entire aura and he just sucked it up and sent it to the astral world. So his physical body was in front of me. He just simply wouldn't relate to that. There was just like, what could he say? What could you say in response to that? If everything in creation were different, I would like it better. Like, why are you saying that? And he just waited. I felt like my words just kind of boinged in the middle of the room and zigzagged off the walls. And then after they finally died, Swami returned and we went on from there. But we do have this constant, what our lives really are an enormous amount of is resistance. I want it to be different. There was this little boy, we had this house, I use the royal we, everything about Ananda is us as far as I'm concerned, whatever country, whenever it happened. We had this house in San Francisco, 5-story mansion that we had for 10 years. Jyotish and Devi were there for part of that. And there was this little 4-year-old boy named Michael, and he was a very strong-willed child. And he grew very tired of, he woke up really early in the morning and no one else was up and it was still dark. And this was exceedingly boring to him. So he crawled out of his bed and he came and he stood, and there was a staircase that went through the whole house. And the house was wooden floors and, bare walls. So it echoed like a drum. He stood in the middle of the stairwell and shouted with all his child voice, "I want it to be morning." He said like that, which of course woke up the entire house and got him just what he wanted, a little entertainment, a little company, a little breakfast, But that has always been, just sort of in the back of my mind. If life weren't so hard, it would be easier. I want it to be morning, like this. So we think of Lahiri Mahasaya's life, and it is relevant that he was a householder with children. And so when you have, in fact, very interesting, Sri Yukteswar was also married, father to daughter. He did not become a Swami until his wife had died and his daughter was married. So we think of this as like somehow not being the same thing. Swami Kriyananda was married, not for his whole life, but for a period of time. He also had a marriage. Most of Master's most advanced disciples were married. Rajarsi Janakananda, Oliver Black, Bill Raymer, Kamala Silva. I mean, there is an emphasis at this point on monastic, but in fact, Master's life rolled out really very, very differently than that. So at the very least, Lahiri Mahasaya tells us that lifestyle is not the determination of spirituality, which, given the fact that for the majority of people in the world, partnership and family is really a superb way to grow spiritually, a wonderful way to serve, and a marvelous way to cause you to have to say, if life weren't so hard, I wish it would be easier, because it demands of us self-understanding, generosity, all of these vast numbers of qualities. And it's not the raising of families or having marriages or anything. There's nothing more spiritual about doing that than being a monk or nun. There's nothing more spiritual about being a monk or nun than being a family. It's just simply whether or not you live it in a spiritual way. I mean, anything can draw you closer to God, and anything can strengthen your ego. And if there's any part of us that imagines I would either be happier, it would be easier, or I would be more spiritual if. Just once you're there, you're not where you want to be. And so the real power, let me put it differently because that's not fair, but the additional power of Lahiri Mahasaya's life, which applies to everybody, is what Nayaswami said about him at the end of that chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi. Now, Nayaswami was this very famous Swami. Yogananda said, if Jesus Christ appeared on the streets of New York City, it would be no less sensational than when Nayaswami walked down the street in Varanasi. He lived for 300 years. He weighed 300 pounds. Am I right? 300 years. He weighed 300 pounds. He never wore any clothes. There are not many Naga sadhus walking around in civilized areas, but I was in a taxi cab in Delhi and I just glanced over and there was this perfectly naked man walking down the street with a danda and a little bit of orange. And it was just like, oh, yeah, of course. Why not? Sky-clad, they call them Naga sadhus. Okay, it's wonderful. And it's just a part of life. And they've just renounced everything. And Nayaswami was that kind of a soul. And you've all read autobiography, you know the stories that are in there. But it was considered at that time that renunciation is how you prove your spirituality. And Lahiri Mahasaya was not only a householder, he was an accountant for the British government. Somehow that little touch just charms me. Can you think of anything? I mean, he wasn't a great musician. He wasn't a magnificent artist. He wasn't a fabulous poet. He was a government accountant. If you're going to talk about something that would not be what you would think, Master was William the Conqueror and Arjuna. And now, of course, Lahiri Mahasaya had lives like that too. But still, it's quite remarkable. There was nothing on the surface of his life that would tell you that this was an avatar come to redirect civilization for a higher age. It was all the power within him. So the other part of that is we have very little understanding of what real power is. We're completely enamored with hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, or celebrity status of some kind, or just or political power, or nuclear buttons, or whatever it might be. We have no idea what real power is. We have power that Babaji describes and Lahiri Mahasaya describes. It is described in their own life, to raise the dead, to change the weather, to just, as Krishna did, to hold the sun in the sky when Arjuna needed an extra hour to keep his oath. And so he wasn't going to make it. So Krishna just held the sun in the sky. And Babaji, Lahiri comes to Babaji, and Babaji just creates a golden palace in a completely barren area. And everybody's hungry, and he says, reach in, get what you want. It's like, that's power. They just play with this world. Politicians and generals and everyone else, they're just moving the chess pieces around. What real power is to be one with the source, not just to play with the toys, So Lahiri Mahasaya's power was very simply not of this world. Just like when Jesus was being arrested and his disciples really wanted him to save himself. And he said, even now my Father could call down, if I asked him, he would call down legions of angels to rescue me. But I was born for this. And so it's not going to happen. But it's not because it couldn't happen. So Lahiri Mahasaya shows us what real spiritual power is. He meditated. quietly. And I'm of an age, and I traveled to India when the house of Lahiri Mahasaya in the narrow lanes of Varanasi was still inhabited by a descendant of the Lahiri family. And so during those years, which was quite a few years, from the late 80s, I don't know exactly when Vanamali left the body, and then the house closed, but we were able to go inside the house, or at least inside the courtyard into some of the rooms. It's very, very small. That's really the main thing, besides being incredibly powerful. It's very small. You have this very small courtyard, and then you go over to this doorway. Vanamali had a very limited concept of his responsibility to the devotees. So you were able to go to the doorway of the room where Lahiri Mahasaya sat and meditated day and night after he retired from being a government accountant. And that room was about this big, you know? And the balcony where he would sit and proclaim the Gita and the whole world was changed, you know, about half the size. You know, and there was no like video screen in some other room or something like that. It wasn't anything that we think of. And yet, Divine Mother thought to send an avatar to live a life that simple. And it was because he was a householder, but it was also because it was that simple. And what he gave was his consciousness. That's all. He just gave his consciousness. Now, of course, he had a great consciousness. But, you know, those of us who are devoted to the light, we all have something to give. And it's not whether it looks like anything, it's whether we know inside ourselves that we are doing we are working at the farthest edge of what we're able to do. When people come to me and ask, should I change jobs? Should I move here? Should I get married? Should I have a child? You know, all the things these are the things we're always asking. I always just ask back, do you feel that you are living at the limit of what you are able to give? And that is the only question. If you know that you're holding back, if you know that there's more in you that you're not offering, then you have to find a way to give it. If that means you have to change your circumstances, then rush to change your circumstances. If it simply means you have to change your energy and your attitude, then rush to do that. Because it's not what it looks like outwardly. It's whether or not you are giving, you are living like the masters lived. You are trying to follow in their footsteps. Of course, we're teeny, we're small potatoes compared to them, you know. But Lahiri just sat there and meditated. People came in the night. He initiated them into Kriya. No organization, no writing that he did himself, no fanfare, but it was a pulse. It was just this pulse. And coming back to Trilanga Swami, in that time, when no one thought you could be that profound if you were in family life, and Trilanga was about as extreme as you could be, having, as he says, renounced even my loincloth, you know what to speak of family and children. But the community was shocked when Trilanga Swami bowed at the feet of Lahiri Mahasaya. It was just unheard of for a renunciate on that scale to have that kind of respect for a householder like that. And that was when Trilanga Swami said, you know, he's a kitten in the mouth of Divine Mother, which is such an amazing concept if you ever see, you know, I feel sorry for animals. I watch them. They have no hands. I know that this is just, monkeys have hands, but dogs and cats have no hands. And everything that they want to do, they have to do with their snout. I mean, it must be humiliating for them. I mean, seriously, I'm going to just digress for a second here. Bookmark, you know. Swami Gyanananda, who was a disciple, he was the Swiss man who received or finished reading autobiography of a yogi on March 7th, 1952, the day that Master died. He was like 22 years old in Switzerland. he was totally enamored and was going to fly immediately or get to California so he could become Master's disciple. He found out Master had died. So he walked from Switzerland to India as a young man. And when he got to the border, you know, they have regulations. They said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I'm coming to find my guru," I think, or something like that. And whoever it was said, "Come right in." And he lived the rest of his life in India. And he was a very marvelous character. Some of us got the chance to meet him. There's somewhere floating around his autobiography, which is well worth reading. And he lived at the end, when I just met him in the last years of his life, and I only met him a few times, he lived in this house up, not above Rishikesh, Dehradun. He had a house up in Dehradun. And one day a taxi cab pulled up, and the only passenger in the taxi cab was a dog. And the dog jumped out, and I don't think he ever found out who sent him the dog. But the dog arrived, and Gyanananda knew that this was one of his disciples, I guess. And he took care of the dog for the rest of life. It was a horribly annoying, yapping, snapping little dog. And he remembered Yudhishthira, who was on his way to heaven, and a dog followed him, and he chose to stay with the dog rather than to enter into heaven. And then the dog manifests as Lord Dharma. So Gyananandaji called this dog Dharma. Yeah, and he took care of him. And when you would go and visit, you'd have to deal with this yapping, snapping little thing. But the end point of this that I heard from people who knew him better, he was obviously some advanced soul that had done some naughty things and ended up in a dog. But the dog was so embarrassed by the fact that he didn't have hands and the only way he could eat was to stick his nose into his food, that he refused to eat in front of anyone. And they would put a little screen there, and he would go behind the screen to eat because it was just so humiliating. Imagine if you, I mean, my 7-year-old nephew once, we picked a big tomato and he just plunged his face into the tomato and ate it, which I made him promise never to tell his mother. And he had a great time, but the average person, I mean, think about it, you know, so they have no hands, they can't deal with it. Now I'm going back, oh, the kitten, that's where we were. So the poor, you know, the puppy mother, the kitten mother, it's like they have nothing, there's no other way to do it. They just have to pick up the kitten in the mouth, and you watch them and you see the little kitten, you know. And if there is a picture of surrender, it's the way the baby accepts the ministrations of the mother, even though it's kind of awkward. I mean, I think it's not accidental. It's kind of awkward, and you don't really know what's happening, and you can't see where you're going. You might still be blind. And there's just this, there has to be this total trust that wherever I'm being taken is exactly where I need to be. And then you're deposited there and you try to figure out where you are and what you're supposed to do next. So to my way of thinking, that's, I mean, there's many things you can think about Lahiri Mahasaya and about all our masters, but you sort of find that which resonates with yourself. And my experience, my benefit that I feel, the first of all is it doesn't have to show. Nobody has to know what you're doing because God knows. And a great deal of the time, what people know doesn't make any difference. I was reviewing a whole bunch of notes that I've had over my years with Swami, seeing if there's another book or two, which there is, but I haven't begun to write it yet. And one of the things that Swami said, and I don't know if he said it to me or not, because I didn't note that carefully, but it said simply, Swami often made global statements about humanity, which I found difficult to accept a lot of the time. And this one, he said, most people are wrong about what they think. Just, you know, very casually, most people are wrong about what they think. And he wasn't talking about our Ananda communities. He was talking about most people. Look at this world. Most people are wrong about what they think. If you ever become popular, remember that. Which is a very simple way. The mere fact that everybody in the world thinks you're wonderful, like on what basis? You know, on what possible basis? And so often those who are popular just rise and fall and rise and fall. The world is endlessly fickle. But God reads the heart. This was something that Master said to Swamiji. God reads the heart. Here's what that means. There's only one consciousness that truly understands us, and that's the divine. And the God and Guru know who we are, even much more than we know ourselves. I tried to give someone advice that I thought was good advice. It was good advice. It was bad timing, terrible timing. And so I was trying to be helpful to this person. And they thought that I was a disgrace to the Ananda ministry. So they called Swamiji and, repeated their version of what they thought had happened and suggested that I really ought to be reprimanded and perhaps deordained, in some way or another. Swami came to me and said, so-and-so called me to tell me what you said. I said, well, what did he say? And he told me. I said, well, sir, of course, it didn't happen like that. And Swami said, yes, of course, I know. And then I said, I resign. I resign from the ministry. You don't have to fire me, like that. Because it's just like, you set out with such good intentions. Now, of course, I was wrong. I really was. I wasn't inaccurate, but I was wrong to have spoken. And I just wanted to throw the whole thing in. Swami said, resignation not accepted. So we went forward from there. But that was when Swami said to me, God reads the heart. Because he knew that I was clumsy as an elephant, but not because I wasn't sincere in my desire to help. And so we get so confused, but God reads the heart. People around you will read whatever they want to read. But what we have to work with, and this is why, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed is that kind of purity. What is that purity, really? It's not, we can say if I had no desires, if I had no ego, but dream on, But the essence of that purity is surrender. It's like, I am not going to posit my likes and dislikes and wants and narrow ideas. I'm not going to push those forward. If God picks me up and moves me to here, I'm going to say, thank you, Lord. And here we are, and where do we go from this point? So Lahiri's message is Lahiri Mahasaya. I've been criticized for calling him Lahiri by Indians who realize that Lahiri is just a last name. So it would be like calling him Smith or Jones. So I always have to say Lahiri Mahasaya. Lahiri Mahasaya's message, first, what does it matter what you do? It matters entirely how you do it. And the second is, wow, what would it feel like to be as surrendered as a kitten to God, in the mouth of God? To be that easy when you're moved, that free when you're moved. And the advantage you see of having all these masters to pray to is, depending on the need of the moment, you can call in the vibration that you need. And that need will always be, that vibration, that need will always be met. God bless you. More music, more meditation.
That's good, guys. Your sopranos. That's a little high. It's right now. Seems a little high. Maybe it's not. Really? Maybe we should lower. But yeah, okay. Okay.
together your wisdom seek. Charge us with truth whene'er we speak. Lord, may we ever know your will. Come to us when our hearts are still. As we your guidance with joy receive, may we as one your bliss achieve. As we your guidance with joy receive, may we as one your bliss achieve.
chant into meditation. Listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget thee. I will never forsake thee. Feeling not only that we're offering that promise to the divine, but feeling that promise in return. That God, the gurus will never forget us, never forsake us.
Listen, listen, listen to my heart
sitting upright. Let's draw our shoulders up to the ears and roll them down, feeling the beautiful heart open, drawing the energy in from the Guru, Lahiri Mahasaya, and our good fortune for this line of Gurus that bless us each day, that come into our meditation, that help us to open our hearts and lift the awareness to the spiritual eye, calling in the blessing of Lahiri on this auspicious evening of the Guru, asking him for a blessing to be with us in our meditations, to help us to strengthen our quality, our depth, our understanding, our inner knowing. We'll meditate together in silence for about 10 minutes. extra added prayer for the people on this planet that may be stuck in resistant patterns, thought patterns, negativity, that the saints and sages of the masters, they call on the divine help, that they can awaken out of ego consciousness and free themselves from the desires and delusions that block their capacity to hold the light. Let's send blessings to all the people that are in need of healing in mind, body, emotional, or soul level. Divine Mother, thou art omnipresent.
Thou art omnipresent.
Thou art within all thy children.
Thou art within all thy children.
Manifest thy healing presence.
Manifest thy healing presence.
In all these dear souls.
In all these dear souls.
Let's rub our hands together, gathering up the energy and the healing that we have received. For all the blessings this evening and chanting through Om 3 times together. Thank you, Asha and Nayaswami, for your beautiful presence tonight, and for all the musicians and for everyone for coming out. It was really great. It's really great to have you all, and we have a special Lahiri Mahasaya supper, so we have some tacos, so please stay and have some tacos. And tomorrow we're going to be spending the day, we'll have some meditation and chanting in the morning at my place at 8, and then we're going to maybe go for a nature hike to Newport, to the cliff walk. So if anyone would like to join, just let me know. And thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And then we're off to New York to go meet our Guru Bhais in New York, and Asha's going to do a satsang there, and all the musicians, and so we're on a great adventure. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Kelly.